Okay, welcome to Talking Niagara this morning with me, Peter Giblett, and him, Dave Wheeler. Good morning, Dave. How are you?
Not bad, but I had a fright of my life.
What a skunk came knocking on the window?
Pretty damn close. So I made my coffee and I went out to my little patio and I looked around, no skunks. I sat down, I started reading off my phone. Next thing you know, there's a skunk within 2 feet of me on my feet. And I'm thinking, don't sneeze, don't sneeze, don't sneeze. And it moved past me. Just there was a little puddle close by where I was sitting, and it was taking a drink. It was 3 feet away from me, less than a meter. It was just there, and I'm just thinking. I'm sitting in my chair thinking, don't sneeze, don't burp, don't sneeze. Because this time of year I sneeze quite a bit because of I don't know. It's every spring and fall I sneeze a lot, and I'm just sitting there just like a statue. And it seemed like forever. The skunk sat there and drank from a little puddle. And I'm thinking, oh no, get out of here, get out of here, And finally it moved a little bit, and then it moved a little bit more, and then it took off. And oh, geez. Wow, what a close one. That was skunk number 3. Remember I told you there was 2 skunks? Well, that was skunk, and I found out there was skunk number 3 a day or two ago. That was skunk number 3. Oh, jeez.
Yeah.
That was a close call, man. A close call.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah,
God.
well, pretty bad, eh? Okay.
Terrifying.
Yeah. All right. So the first story that was on here that we didn't get to yesterday was some LGBTQ whatever activists say Trudeau is putting queer and gay, gender diverse people at risk by not stepping down. And the context here is that they believe that a Poilievre government could be damaging to their cause.
I read that and I thought to myself, oh, come on.
That's exactly what I thought, Dave.
I thought, seriously, there are, even before any special laws to protect LGBTQ have been put in place or on the books to be put in place or whatever it is, there are a raft of laws that protect LGBTQ people. There are scads of laws that protect Canadians in the Constitution. Before, I think it was like in 2018 or something, there was more laws brought in to protect the LGBTQ2 movement. I seriously think that this is more damaging to Trudeau or to the Liberals than anything. So they're insisting, hi, we're the gay bunch, gay and trans people, and we're really happy with your support, Trudeau, but now we want you gone because we think that, thanks, but here's your hat. What's your hurry? Seriously, he's the guy that stood up for them. You know what I mean? He's the guy that.
What they're pointing at here is apparently Poilievre has made comments saying that minors should not have access to puberty blockers and transgender athletes should be barred from women's sports and changing rooms.
Well, yeah, isn't that really more or less the Canadian consensus? The average citizen is concerned about children making unwise decisions about transition, and whether or not that's right or not, the average person would think that. Like, you don't want a kid to make those kind of decisions in the state of adolescence. As a matter of fact, we are told over and over and over again that an adult brain doesn't develop until it's 26 years old. We are still adolescents basically right up until 26, especially for men. Well, men might be like 46, but Anyway,
or 66 even.
yeah, well, I'm still waiting for my adult transition.
Yeah.
But this is, it's been a couple of days since I've read that article, but I read it and I think, no, as a matter of fact, you don't do that. What you do is you try, you're putting too much fear out there. They're worried about Polyev making rules and laws based on the general attitude of Canadian citizens.
Well,
Almost
actually,
all Canadian citizens have put this to a thought, would have agreed with Polyev on this. And you don't want biological men in women's spaces. That the whole idea of the women's rights groups and all that other stuff is to establish female spaces and safe spaces, part of it, and to be able to celebrate females as an equal half of humanity.
The next sentence that I'm about to say is something that I've heard several times in the last few weeks, relating to several different issues, and that is that Polyev has admitted on the record he's willing to use Section 33 of the Human Rights Act to essentially introduce new laws on a withstanding clause.
Yeah. Yeah, so the concept, what we found out by, I think Quebec started it with the not withstanding clause, used that. And at first, when we find out the Constitution is not as thorough as we thought it would be. There are exceptions to the Constitution. And one of them, of course, is the notwithstanding clause. I think Saskatchewan used it recently. You can, once you institute,
Saskatchewan has used it once, but Quebec has used it about 5 or 6 times.
Yes, and that is to override the Constitution when it doesn't really apply well to your own particular provincial situation. It was put in there primarily for Quebec to appease them when the Constitution was being written, because it has a unique culture in Quebec. And of course, a very different situation altogether. So they felt that Quebec we should have some sort of exception, but they couldn't get it to just them. So what we find that the Saskatchewan has used it, and the federal government has not used it yet. And Polyev has suggested that he might use it, and I can see why he would. Because if he went to some constitutional, try to change the laws as they are, it would take forever to get around to making laws that could do something about the LGBTQ not taking drugs until they're 18 years old, or having biological men identifying as women going to into women's change rooms and washrooms. It would take a very long time. And one thing we haven't discussed here is that Trudeau is now stacking the Senate as he's leaving. He's stacking the Senate with liberal leaning or liberal ideologues in the Senate.
Yeah.
So that when the Conservatives do get in, and if they do have a majority, they will be blocked in the Senate. So if they do come up with a law that says, biological men are not allowed into female spaces, or children cannot have these sex blockers in drugs and transitions and things like that, he'll face a mountain of bureaucratic so that's why the notwithstanding clause would speed that up.
I'm not a fan and never have been. I don't believe that we should have a notwithstanding clause with it. I think Section 33 should be struck from the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, because I think it's a way to abuse the Charter. But that said, I understand why people don't want trans, especially pre-transition people using the wrong gender changing rooms. And also I understand the puberty blockers thing, although because I think that you're too young to really make a decision at that stage.
Yes, and it pertains to a very small amount of the population,
Yeah.
normally, but we
Yeah.
seem to have what is called a social contagion, and it's and the sh- and the many sexual identity problems among the young are um, often compared to the anorexic bulimia social contagion that ran through the world in the 90s, I think it was, where a lot of people, particularly women, mostly women, felt that they were too heavy and they had too much weight on them, so they started to starve themselves.
Yeah.
And they thought when they were really thin and unhealthy looking that they were really nice looking. And it was a heck of a problem for people to convince people that anorexia bulimia was a social contagion. That it was a wrong thing to do. It got into the brain. It was a psychological disease, basically. We know that Karen Carpenter died of it.
Yeah.
She got the social contagion. It's a psychological
This
disease,
is a this is
and
a new
millions of people died or suffered from it for years and years.
yeah, and
And
this
they
is the
believe
modern
that
day social contagion, isn't it?
yeah. And when in the UK they found that, well, I think it was a couple of years ago, that something like 25 the amount of young women who thought that they should be men blew up 25 times that it normally had, and like to the point where there were thousands and some thousands and thousands of young women who thought they should be transitioning. That was a very, very unusual, based on the fact that prior to that the numbers were very, very small, and it was almost always males trying to
Yeah.
transition to females. So
And,
the
but I
evidence
have
of the
to
social
say,
contagion is out there.
I have to say that there's always, not in everybody necessarily, but there must be a lot of people who kind of men who kind of wonder, well, I wonder what life would be like as a woman, and conversely, women who would wonder what life would be like as a man. That curiosity doesn't necessarily lead anywhere.
Well, I anytime I sort of think of things like that, I don't get too far. If I think of myself, if I was think of myself as a woman, all I could think of is how could I have sex with myself. So I can't get the I can't get the man thing out of me, you know. But yeah, let's face it. Like there is this point, and that I actually learned it off of an episode of House that I didn't even watch, but I saw part of it where a young woman, a beautiful young woman, was actually should have been a male, and she was quite beautiful, and she had certain problems, and House had to figure it out. And it turned out that she she had the all kinds of estrogen, but she had the gene to switch, because at conception we're basically all females, and then the testosterone thing kicks in, and then those who are going to be boys, and the XX are going to be girls, and the XYs are going to be boys. But if that Y genetic doesn't kick in, then you get a super female almost, because you have super feminine female, because the testosterone, no testosterone or very little has ever affected anything, because we all have testosterone and estrogen. Just men have more testosterone and women have basically estrogen. So that may be part of the problem. And another thing too is that in nature, you don't find this anywhere else. We are animals like any other animals, and you don't find this confounded anywhere else. So the evidence of something that we do as humans, what we eat, or whatever our psychology is, might interfere with how our sexual identity comes around, because basically in nature and everywhere else, you do not find that anything. You do have, you probably find there is the thing of hermaphrodites. Probably that happens in every species, but human beings are basically an animal like any other animal. And yet you don't find this confounding sexual identification problem in other species. So particularly the idea of transitioning and things like that.
Yeah.
So
Mike Cushman says we need to abolish the Senate.
That's a good point. I was going to bring that up. Thank you, Metaphysical Mike. If the Senate will block anything that Polyev comes in to do, and that means that we should elect the Senate if we do anything.
Precisely my view, it's undemocratic to have, I agree with the idea of the concept of an upper house. I believe that we should have it elected. I believe that they should be elected at a time when they should not be permitted to have any political affiliation, right? They should be people who have essentially have a past in some way or other, in terms of not political necessarily, but business, academics and that sort of thing, who express an interest in some things that have political overtones, and we should elect them as independents, and we should give them like a 10-year term, once off 10-year term.
Mike Simone, or Chris Simone, sorry, says the woke mind virus always eats itself. He bought into the 2S LGBTQIA plus. There's another letter that I didn't know about, and now they are eating him. Yeah, that could be it. But the biggest problem that I see is we are diminishing the females in our society, mostly by trying to include men made into females, and sort of diminishing the female spaces. Like, that is just female. You got to have it female. You got to have equal but different sort of place. But if you try to keep introducing biological men in there, that's a big problem. And it wouldn't be so much of a problem if women who transition to men come into men's spaces, because they can't be hurt by these guys, these transitioning women at all. Like, so I don't know.
This whole question's a really complex one anyway. Basically that then leads us with 3 types of washrooms, doesn't it?
Well, we already have them. But the problem here is, like in universities, like I forget that swimmer's name, where he was in the female washrooms or change rooms, and he still had all his male apparatus. And so
Yeah.
he's changing with females, and also he's competing with them, and he has the advantage of going through
And
puberty as a
that's
male
so
and having
wrong. Yeah.
muscles.
Yeah, that's so wrong. Yeah. Yeah. And there's not an easy answer to any of that lot.
No, it isn't, and like I said before, it occurs in nature. Like my niece is in the maternity ward in one of the hospitals here, and she says once in a while you get a child that has no genitalia or no indication whether it's a female or a male, and those children are taken away, and they have to be studied somehow to figure out what do they do to stimulate their sex one way or the other.
Yeah.
And so it does occur. And hermaphrodite,
you do get the,
yeah,
you do get the hermaphrodite, and as well, but they're rare. They're they're like 1 in like 10 million kids or less, right, or fewer, right?
And then you do get these people like Bruce Jenner, and they're not very common, but they're out there, who are men, have children, get married, have children, and all that, but have felt that they were women all along, but function as male, and then they feel much more comfortable when they transition to a woman because something's not firing on all cylinders in their pituitary or whatever, and they feel much more comfortable. But they are men, and they grow up as men, and something in their psychology feels they should be a woman.
I have a friend in the UK who's like that, born a man, transitioned to a woman, and he's now fully transitioned. She is now fully transitioned. And I worked with them for a period of time, 4 or 5 years. Still friends, and will remain friends.
Well, I got a buddy that I just saw a few days ago with his friend, and it was his friend was dressed as a woman in a mini skirt and other feminist stuff and all that, but had a man voice. If the man voice didn't come out of him, I wouldn't have realized that that person had been born a male anyway. And
All right, Mike makes a point about psychiatric help. All right. Yeah. Find psychiatric help if you're confused. Sometimes there's too much psychiatric help, I think, sometimes. Anyway.
Who's going to be the psychiatrist of the psychiatrist?
Always a big question. Okay, let's move on. There's several opinions about why Ford might call an early Ontario election, and it's interesting. This has been swirling around for more than a few weeks now. In fact, it was when he took the summer break for the Ontario Parliament, which I think was like the last week in June. The speculation had been around for probably 2 or 3 weeks about how we could effectively go to an October election in Ontario, and that basically it might be advantageous for Ford to do so, call election early.
I don't know why he has a majority government.
Yeah.
He has a majority government, and the only thing I can think of is their idea that during their mandate the economy will take a dip, and they will, and of course, economy is one of those things that will change a government, the bad economy.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking he's looking forward. Some economists have come to him and said, by the time your mandate's over, we're going to be in a recession and things are going to look bad. And he might be thinking like Trudeau thought when tried to take advantage of his own popularity back during COVID that didn't work. I'm wondering if you're thinking, well, I've got a huge. He's got 44% popularity right now,
Yeah.
or approval rating by Ontarians. So it may be an astute political move, but I am totally against early elections when you already have a mandate.
Well,
When you have a mandate, you have a huge majority. You can get a whole lot of stuff done. Why do you want to do an election now? It just doesn't make sense to me. But except if you think of them looking into the future and when the next election will come,
yeah.
and they may have a lot of very
Well,
controversial
remember
things they want to bring into the onto the legislature that might water down their popularity temporarily. I think what they're trying to do is get their mandate through the next economic zone downturn, so that it's on its way back up when the next election comes.
And that makes a lot of sense. And at the moment, the rival parties, the Liberals, NDP, Green, etc., are all nominating candidates in the expectation that there will be an election sometime soon. And I certainly think that maybe next spring or summer might well be an advantageous time for Ford to go to the polls, right? And depending exactly upon those economic circumstances that you're talking about. Because there's a point at which you kind of go, well, I can see for the next 6 months, 8 months, 12 months, the economic situation is going this particular direction. I don't know what it's going to be going like afterwards, but I don't want it taking a downturn. Don't want to take it a nosedive.
Yes, and it's just like typically, like, you have a massive majority and you're doing it again. And I will tell Ford, remember Peterson's government back in the 90s. The Liberals finally beat a long-standing conservative government. They had a majority, and they thought they were going, and they called an early election to see if they could get a better one, and they got wiped off the map. So they went from the governing party to nothing, and it was because the Ontario citizens rejected an early called election. They were angry about it, and
but I
Ford
think
Ford could find himself in that same situation right now. He doesn't want to anger his. He's got a huge majority, and why he would want to call it, and that's what I would say, that they have a long-term projection, and they feel that the economy might not be in a really good shape when the next time comes for his party to be elected. And
maybe what you end up with is a fall 25 election or something like that.
Maybe, but why anything at all? Why doesn't he complete his mandate of at least 4 years?
Well, I get you. I understand what you're saying. Okay, so but there's a lot of varying views about it. I can understand. You see, as the premier, and even with Trudeau as the prime minister, they have the time to look at and say, okay, when is the best time for me? And the best time for me might not be, in the case of the provincial election, might not be June of 26. It might be, let's say, October of 25.
Well, all the indications are that there is this possible recession that's going to hit North America, and Canada especially vulnerable to this. The expectation of a recession that's coming is persistent, although everybody says we're not in a recession, we're still fairly healthy, but that persistent idea that there is a recession on its way, maybe that's the thing that's scaring them. That's my only guess right now. And to call an election, I wouldn't call it an abuse of power, but but an election costs us a lot of money. When Trudeau
Yes, it
called his
does.
election back during COVID times, that cost an incredible amount of money when he
It did.
already had a governing party and nothing
But
changed.
again, it does cost a lot of money, but elections are budgeted into the budget, so there's already been money put aside for running elections. Mike makes the point that Ontario is already a third world country in the middle of Canada due to Ford's policies, and four more years and are we done, right? It also says irreversible environmental gutting is not sustainable. And further, there are many homeless. There are so many homeless. What more do you need to say? We are in a recession.
Well, I will counter that, and I'm being the devil's advocate here, Mike. So don't get angry. But Ford will say that the economy is set up for a future. They worked with the federal government to make a lot of very essential EV plants. Unfortunately, those are not really working well right now, but that has more to do with the economy and the attitude of our citizens. When I was in Europe or Portugal, there's a lot more electric cars or electric buses, and those other things. Those things are coming, whether we like it or not. They may be delayed for now, but Ford, along with the federal government, actually, in showing that he can team up with the feds, have improved the Ontario economy by bringing those EVs in. Remember, Oshawa car plant was leaving Ontario until Ford got in. They had made plans. They announced that they were going to close the Oshawa car plant, which is a huge part of Ontario economy, and he's turned that back. And when he got into power,
And
so that would be the arguments that he would use, and.
And you're right. There's been a lot of development of electric vehicle conversion in Ontario. So it would argue that we're not in recession.
Well,
I'm a bit ambivalent on that because I generally look at I look at things like homelessness and believe that to be a clear indicator of recession.
I think that is more due to the segmentation of our population, the haves and the have-nots. We find that the standard of living for the middle class person is going down, and of course that pushes more people into onto the streets or to couch surfing. I think there's plenty of money in Ontario that could be shared more. Could be disseminated more fairly, but we have unfortunately we have this capitalist system that moves money up all the time. So you get the 1%ers that own half the wealth in Ontario, and you get the rest getting the rest of the wealth. And of course, that my statistics there might be a bit of an exaggeration, but you have money moving up to fewer and fewer hands at the top.
But he's basically saying that, hey, Dave, your children can't afford a good home, and that's a clear indication that we're in recession.
Then we've been in a recession for 10 years then.
And I would agree. Actually, we've been in recession. Much of the Western economy has been in recession since 2008.
Well, not by the metrics of economists, and they judge whatever they do, the GDP, this or that, or whatever else we are on the cusp of an economic recession. Let's say not a I don't know. We do not fit the definitions of a recession yet, and that means so many quarters of minus growth or something like that.
Yeah,
and I do agree with you, though. A recession can have its effects before and after it's official. And if you remember the 1992 recession, that was brutal to me. 91, 92. that was absolutely brutal for me. It took a long time for me to crawl out of that one and get work and so on before the economy included. But officially, it only lasted 8 months. And they said, ta-da, we're better now. The recession's over. But meantime, it took the economy a long time to recover from it and build itself back up. So the damage was still done for for a couple of years after the official recession had concluded.
Yep. All right, moving on. Niagara Hydrogen Centre will be Ontario's largest green hydrogen production facility, and this is happening on Whirlpool Drive. Along with the canals to the hydro canal to the James Beck Power Station. It's happening along Whirlpool Road, actually, where this is happening, and it will be a 20 megawatt facility to use electrolysis technology to split water into hydrogen and oxygen molecules in order to capture pure hydrogen.
Yes. I have to thank John Ringo Beam for this article, because there was a thread going on about Paul K. Lemire had suggested that the electric car was already dead, the battery reactor, and suggested that the hydrogen vehicles will then take its place. Now, I then wrote back and said that the problem with the hydrogen is that most of it comes from natural gas, which makes it a polluting process right now. The other way of which to get hydrogen is through introducing electricity into water and separating the hydrogen atoms from the oxygen atoms.
Yeah.
And I didn't know of any big facility that was doing that. And then John Ringo Beam responded and with this article. And when I asked
this is an article by what's it, Altura Power, which is a company that is making that is responsible for making this 20 megawatt facility for electrolysis technology to split water and hydrogen molecules. I mean, I said atoms, I meant molecules.
Now, this process, what they're going to do is they're going to take excess electrical power or generate even their own electrical power for this use. So it's going to be a 20 megawatt operation, which is fairly small.
Well, this is why it's along the edge of the canal. This is why it's along the edge of the canal.
And what they want to do is take, and they don't have a reservoir or a very small reservoir for power here. And there's another aspect of this. So, of course, they're going to build it. They're going to separate the hydrogen. They're going to use that hydrogen to fire, presumably to fire a generator, and then through a medium or through some sort of substation at Seratum Beck 2, and then reintroduce that power. Now the problem, and one of the drawbacks of having a big hydro facility is it mars the environment. You have to you have to adjust or make a big dam and interfere with the natural processes. This one is going to take the water that as it passes, basically, and use that as a generator rather than have a reservoir, or at least only a small reservoir.
Yeah.
So that doesn't interfere too much with the environment. So a lot of thought's being put into this.
Yeah. And as you say, it's integrated with the Adam Beck Power Station. And I'm not sure, are they actually utilizing this as, are they going to be utilizing the hydrogen within the power station environment, or is then the hydrogen available on the open hydrogen market?
What it looks like says a dedicated 3.5 kilometer, 27.7 kilovolt. That's not a whole lot. Electricity distributing line will deliver green hydroelectric power to the Niagara Hydrogen facility, all energy to the power facility will come from Soredenbeck 2 generating station, and the tie-in to the existing 230 kV high voltage connection between Soredenbeck 2 and the generating GS and Hydro 1's high voltage switchyard is necessary to provide sufficient energy power to the Green Hydrogen Production Society. This electrical substation will include all necessary high voltage equipment. Now, they don't talk at all about making a generator that then use the hydrogen to make more power. It is generating hydrogen generation facility, basically.
Yeah,
but it does.
And the idea, therefore, could well be that they'll be selling hydrogen on the open, on the to the hydrogen market.
Now, here's a hint of what's going to happen. Some of the hydrogen produced is planned to be blended into one of the Atura Power's gas turbines in Halton Hills generating station, which would result in Ontario's first coal-fired electricity generating station using hydrogen. This project is supported by the financial. Okay, so basically what you do is you have a generating station. And remember that when we closed off our coal burning generation station, we replaced them basically with gas generators and told everybody we replaced them with solar and wind. Well, solar and wind, there is that out there, but it did not have the ability to replace the power needs. So they built gas generators and never said too much about that. But in this particular case, just like they use dump gas, basically the gas that comes from waste fill sites in a generator in Thorold, they'll use this one here, this hydrogen to add to the natural gas. This would make it much more efficient, by the way, because hydrogen gives off more BTU than natural gas, and its resulting exhaust is water. So so you'll reduce the pollution that's going in, the carbon and other greenhouse gases going into the air.
Yeah. And they're expecting commercial operations to start effectively this at the tail end of 2025.
Now, I like to know the amount of power that's used to generate the hydrogen, and then that hydrogen then has to be transported to a generating station. Is there a net gain there? Because if you're generating a facility to using electricity that would have normally been used in everywhere else in where electricity is used, but if you take that electricity and then put it into hydrogen generation, and then take that hydrogen and put it into a gas, is there a net gain there? I think the amount of electricity you use and then the amount of electricity then you do gain is not efficient, not yet anyway.
Yeah, but that efficiencies will come, through the system eventually. I think.
Well, yeah, this is an experimental and product. And I do remember when I was at Nanticoke, they were experimenting with wood chips and other organic things that grow quickly, like grass or whatever else, and they tried to use it in the boilers system, firing boilers to make power. It didn't come out too well, though.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we've discussed quite a few things local there, as well as some other strange things in our local Canadian society. So moving abroad, Sudan's basically suffering a war and humanitarian crisis, and as this article by the CBC was pointing out, is that it's essentially gone largely unnoticed by the world because of what's happening in Gaza and Ukraine.
Well, luckily for me, the news that I I search out for on the TV or YouTube or even in the news, printed newspapers and so on. I'm exposed to this kind of thing, so I'm very well aware of it. But no, almost nobody else is. Sudan, of course, was the largest country in Africa until it split into two. So they had this 30-year conflict where the South Sudanese split from the North Sudanese, and the North Sudanese. So the country of Sudan now is now basically having a civil war within itself. So the civil war that split Sudan in half. Now the northern part, which is the part that has Khartoum in it, the old and most identified as Sudan, is having a terrible civil war, and this is between the Sudanese armed forces and a paramilitary rapid support forces. But the rapid support forces are more like are the same as the Janjaweed. The Janjaweed, as we know, were a Arab-based militia group that went around and raided their neighbors who were also Muslims, but were not of Arab ethnic group. So this isn't a religious thing. It's an ethnic thing. So right now, the rapid support, the rapid support forces, aka the Janjaweed, are surrounding towns and villages and laying waste to them and burning them from the outside in.
Well, there's estimates here that somewhere between 20,000 and 150,000 people have been killed.
I would go for the latter figure from what I've read and heard from other places. And this is only the latest incarnation. If you wanted to add up all the people who have died and suffered from this continuous, the Civil War first, and then the continuous raids by the Janjaweed in Darfur. We know about Darfur. It did make the headlines. Well, Darfur is still being attacked. And it's in one way, it's an ethnic fight between more Arab Africans that find themselves feeling they're more culturally Arab, and those who are Africans, but they're both Muslim. They're both Sunni Muslims, so there's no religious aspect to this. And against pastoralists and farmers, and that's another thing. The one group is pastoralists, and the other group is farmers. So they have in conflict. They have big conflicts in the land areas. That obviously the pastoralists need a lot of land, and if the agriculturalists use that land for agriculture, there's less pastoral. This goes right back to the same kind of fights they used to have in the wars, the cowboy wars back in the 1880s, most notably the ones that Billy the Kid was involved in, where the sheep farmers and the regular dirt farmers would have wars, fighting over land, and they would erupt into the Lincoln County War.
Well, yeah, exactly. So back in the West, there used to be this a constant battle between sheep farmers, who the cattle farmers basically were saying were destroying the landscape, and vice versa.
Yes, and also the regular ordinary dirt farmer needs you need a lot of land to be able to plant stuff, and that interrupted also in the mix. So this is kind of similar. I mean, there's similarly speaking, these two groups, the Janjaweed and the who call themselves, were calling themselves the Janjaweed, but now call themselves the Rapid Support Forces. It's an ethnic, basically more or less an ethnic militia fighting other ethnicities. And of course, like both sides, the Sudanese armed forces and the Rapid Support Forces, are both behaving abominably. with
blinded by
one
their
is
own.
massacring one, the other is massacring it.
Yeah,
It's massacre after massacre. The poor people there are being pushed off their land, very similar as in Gaza. Of course, got a lot more land to run to, but starvation, medical, and all that is disrupted.
yeah, yeah. Like and disgusting. It's if yeah, it's disgusting, and world needs to do something about it. But this has been lost
It
to
is.
the world.
Apparently, they've had some sort of peace deals where the aid groups, the NGOs, were able to get in there and get some food relief and stuff like that. The United States has brokered some kind of deal between the two, the kind of deal they can't get in Gaza for some reason, but they can get one here
Yeah,
to two extreme enemies, and they were able to get them um, to cooperate in a deal to try to get some sort of humanitarian relief there. I don't know how successful that will be, but they actually have a deal. I don't know why they
yeah,
can't do it in Gaza. They can do it here.
yeah. But it's okay. It's okay, Dave. Christmas is coming in October in Venezuela, according to the mad dictator there.
Yeah, Maduro. Yeah, he is acting like a mad dictator. Basically, he's coming along the lines of Idi Amin almost, except he's not slaughtering people like Idi did. But remember, Idi Amin, he once made a speech that the two things he would want to be, he made his, like, he'd have these long speeches like dictators do. He got on the radio one time and told his people that if he had his wish, he'd want to be the president of the United States or the king of Scotland. And of course, everybody shook their head, and he went on and on. Of course, he's very logical about wanting to be the president of the United States because of the amount of power that was wielded by the president. So that
Yeah,
kind of made sense. And then he went on to say his other option was to be the king of Scotland, and no one could figure out why he wanted to be that, except for the fact that he had a love for bagpipe music.
and the irony, of course, there is a film out there called Last King of Scotland, which is about Idi Amin and Idi Amin's rule, and supposedly within this, one of his henchmen was actually a Scottish-born nutcase.
Well, in reality, it was a doctor. It was told through the lenses of his doctor, a Scottish doctor. But in reality, that story was real, very much based on real. But the doctor was Israeli, and
Yeah,
they had to take that out because they didn't want the Israelis to look bad there, because Israel was cooperating very much with Uganda at that time, and they had and of course the Ugandans turned on them, and that's why you had Entebbe. If you remember Entebbe,
yeah, oh, yeah. The raid.
the Entebbe raid to save Israeli citizens there, and the one person, the one Israeli commando that was killed during that raid was Netanyahu's brother. But if
Yeah.
you see
Okay.
that film, I didn't understand why they had a Scottish doctor. They didn't have to have a Scottish doctor because the real doctor was Israeli, and a lot of the
Yeah.
supporting supports that came from Uganda government back in those days came from Israel.
Okay. Yeah. So, and he's basically this Nicolas Maduro has made curious announcement that this year's festivities will begin in October. Amidst a political bleak midwinter crisis-stricken land. So, and he said his announcement was, "It's September and it already feels like Christmas." Yeah,
Well, what happened was he had this mock election where he won, of course, and he says, "Oh, that means that everything's great for everyone, so I'm going to bring Christmas a little earlier so that we can all celebrate." basically what he's trying to do is deflect the population's agitation of what's just happened. Now, we can think of this as funny and all that, but Maduro has got his armies and is threatening to invade Guyana right beside it, Little Wee Guyana, which used to be British Honduras. Now, that's a country that's been very, very poor, and Maduro hasn't had any kind of interest in it at all. But now that they've found all kinds of natural gas and oil off the coast of Guyana, he wants a big hunk of it. He wants about 2/3 of the land, and that goes back to a dispute that's I think is over 100 years old, but is trying to be resolved in an international court, I guess, right now. But he says he's going to take it. Now, Little Wee Guyana, which is about a population of 1 million, cannot fight Venezuelan military. And why does Venezuela want to stick it to Guyana anyway? They've got as much oil as anyone. I think they got the world's largest reserves of oil, don't they?
One of, yeah.
It's the number one. It's the number one, I think. Yeah,
you might be right. Yeah, I know it's in one of the top 2 or 3. That's for sure. And yeah, so it's all probably all about oil, and that's probably why they want Guyana. Yeah. Anyway, I always thought that Belize was actually British Honduras.
Maybe it was British Guyana.
That I think
makes more sense. Yeah. Belize was British. Yeah, you're right. So it was.
Although I always found why there's a gap. There's a massive gap between Honduras and British Honduras.
Yes.
and that gap is caused by the fact that Guatemala, I think, owns the land between those 2 countries.
Yes, indeed. Well, that's the only English-speaking the only English-speaking country in Central America is Belize, which used to be, and I will be corrected, British Honduras. And it's British Guyana in South America is the only English-speaking country of a tiny million or so people in South America. Although there are variations of the language there. There are, of course, their own particular kinds of patois and different mixes of language. They have a unique language. Plus, they have a lot of Indians from the subcontinent that settled there many years ago. They came over when they freed the slaves. They then made Indians and Chinese people indentured servants, which is like, a millimeter up from being a slave, and that accounts for the admixture of that particular demographic.
Yeah. So but this is. I think this is what you would call typical deflection by a crook, right?
Yeah, he's they can't shove him off of power. They thought they would when he first got in. They thought they would celebrate his opposition leader and say that he won, and the United States recognized his opponent as the prime minister or president, whatever it is. And so did other countries. It didn't work. He just kept on doing what he was doing. And they felt that the people would revolt against him and overthrow him. They did not. They had, they had their own problems. In Venezuela, to them, probably one president is the same as the other. Maduro is probably no better or worse than anyone else. And but the unfortunate part of it is that you have a lot of a huge brain drain go out of Venezuela all the time when these politics are at play. You need a more stable government, and you need a more equitable government.
Yeah,
and that is infringing upon Venezuela's ability to advance past the point of being a provider of oil.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Niagara Parks is planning to build an outdoor artificial ice skating loop up probably where the old rink at the Brink was across from the Horseshoe Falls?
I think this is a pretty good idea, really.
Well, they
It's
had
not
the
gonna-
rink from the Brink for quite some time, didn't they? It went on for probably 7 or 8 years.
Okay, here it is. Venezuela had the world's largest proven crude oil reserves as of 2023.
Okay.
Yeah.
There you go. Okay. Yeah. So they're basically bringing back the rink at the Brink, right?
Yes, indeed. No, this is a little bit different. It's going to be a pathway kind of thing, as if a loop where you can kind of. It's not going to be a rink, but more of a loop, and it's going to be. It's going to be an artificial one because we can't maintain natural ice anymore in this part of the country. So I think it's a good idea. Like I remember the rink at the Brink. I went there skating myself once. I took my niece there, I think, and my boys there to skate one time. It's really kind of a nice, pleasant winter activity. You don't see ice rinks around much anymore. You don't see people used to do that. People used to, your dad, your mom used to grab their skates, sling them on, and go for a skate in an afternoon just to have a pleasant skate. I know my dad came with me a few times to the school rink, and he'd skate and that kind of thing, and and everybody would grab hold of him in a big long chain, and he would skate, and all the kids would just be pulled by him, and then he'd turn, and of course they would whip all the kids around, and some of them would fall off, and then laugh, and jump on again. So you don't see that almost anywhere anymore. It was a common sight to have ice rinks around and kids playing on them. Well, I think this is a good thing. It brings that back a bit. Mm-hmm. It doesn't cost Niagara Falls any money. This is the parks thing. So this is not. If somebody says, "Oh no, it sounds good, but it's going to cost us a lot of money," but it won't. It's the Niagara Parks thing, and of course they're trying to stimulate more.
I'm curious to know how these artificial ice artificial ice skating works.
You have to have a generator and a coolant system. Basically, every rink does in Niagara Falls. It has basically a giant.
I know that, but is that are they basically saying that that's what they're generating on the loop? They're actually generating artificial ice around the loop, or are they is this something else that they're making?
No, it's ice.
No. Okay. All right.
Yeah. No, they're not making cement. It doesn't work. They don't make an asphalt. No,
was not suggesting it would. Was not suggesting. I've not really been an ice skater. I've been the one who hung. Was the one who hung on the end of that chain that you were talking about. Fearful of being whipped off the chain because I'm going to be the guy who crashes into the boards and just makes this great big explosion as the boards break.
Yeah, well, the rinks I'm talking about were all natural ice rinks, so we didn't have, and we had two huge ones in the park close to me. It's like a 10-minute walk away, and the school is a 15-minute walk away. We were two huge rinks there. They're all natural, and they lasted most of the winter. Every once in a while, you'd have a thaw, but you just have to wait till it cooled down again. It was a matter of days, and then you're back out, and you go to the ice rink, put on your skates, skate like mad, get soaked to the ass, and come home.
Yeah, got you. Yeah, I suppose that's what the kids did back then.
Oh God, yeah, we were on it all the time. I couldn't get enough of it.
Yeah. Okay, so basically, there's about 100,000 of Niagara Parks money is going on to the design and installation of new exhibits as well.
Are you talking about
between
the
Victoria Park.
feds? The feds funneling about $1 million down this way, and 100,000 are going to
No,
the
they're talking.
museum.
Yeah, basically, yes, exactly. Right. There's about 100,000 going to artwork, etc., going to the Niagara-on-the-Lake Museum as well. Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, I took that out of context. Yeah, I just realized where it was. Yeah. So Niagara-on-the-Lake Museum is receiving about $100,000 worth of new design, installation of new exhibit displays with technology and accessibility elements as well. So that's federal
Well, aren't
money.
they also they're also building a museum more dedicated to Black and Indigenous history of the area, the least told history of the area, and we know during the
Yeah.
War of 1812, that war that uh, made Canada basically from 1812 on. Once the American forces were defeated and went back home, they that's when Canada started. But during that war, it was black troops, freed black troops, who of course were fighting like tigers because they sure didn't want to be slaves anymore.
Yep.
Again, and the indigenous warriors who did also see their own particular
Yeah.
survival at risk
Yeah.
were also fought at tigers. We could the Brits and the Canadian militias could not have won that war without them.
And basically,
And
yeah,
yet we do not talk of that often.
yeah, yeah. I get you. I get you. And okay, so there's basically about 10 projects going across Niagara, which this is one of them, right?
Yes, that's one of them. So the feds have fed $1 million down this way. I don't want to be cynical, thinking that it's fed this way because there's an election coming. They would have given it to us weeks before the election if I thought that we're going to do that. And okay, Karen Fraser says, "Have a great weekend, everybody. Remember to bring in the patio decor." Well, I'm fearful of my patio because of skunks. And as I said today, I don't know if you and any of your listeners had heard earlier in the show that I was sitting on my patio this morning and a skunk came within a few feet of me. I'm serious. Like it was like he walked 2 feet past me and then stopped and had a drink out of a little puddle. He was less than a meter away from me. And I'm sitting there just holding my breath, hoping I didn't sneeze. And it seemed like forever for him to get his drink and go. I'm terrorized in my own condo.
You need skunk defense, Dave. You need skunk defense. Basically, a robot army that's out there to protect your patio that will kill the skunks. There you go. That's your
It'll have
answer.
to be something because I certainly don't I certainly don't have the arsenal that a skunk had. I wouldn't measure up.
All right. Okay. So where are okay? We are way okay. We're over time anyway. Yeah. So we'll leave it at that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Without further ado, I bid you adieu, everyone. Pray for peace. It's we talked about Sudan today, but one that elusive peace deal in Gaza is I'm dropping this right on the U.S. They have the power to stop it, and they refuse to do that.
Yep.